Welcome to Oversaturated, Entitled Garbage, the podcast where we discuss topics that have been drowned out, overstated, and repeated to the point where they are ignored, dismissed, or just accepted as part of life, when maybe they shouldn't be. This show isn't here to be groundbreaking, it's here to highlight the importance of regular people talking about relevant topics, no matter how silly or overdone they might seem. Because when something becomes cliche, we tend to avoid it. But what if something really, really important is cliche? When something gets talked about too much, we stop questioning it. But does that mean it's not worth discussing? Let's find out. We like to believe that we arrive at our beliefs on our own, that it's our own thought processes and logic and reasoning that lead us to our destination. But increasingly, what we believe isn't necessarily just by reasoning, it's shaped by what we're exposed to. What we call echo chambers lead us to conclusions that maybe at the start of our journey we would have never arrived at. And while it's obvious to point out, the fact that it's obvious doesn't necessarily change its impact or influence. This is Oversaturated, Entitled Garbage. It's a podcast where we talk about social issues, popular culture issues, and how they frame our perspectives, whether it's first world problems or something a bit deeper. And today's episode, we are going to be talking about echo chambers. And this is the foundational episode, and echo chambers is a really prudent topic to talk about first, and that's because I'll be coming back to the concepts that I kind of lay down and how I believe it affects our perspectives and what we value greatly within ourselves. Echo chambers was definitely a hype word maybe a year ago, maybe a couple of years ago even. And I think over time, it slowly lost its power. I think for a while, talking about echo chambers was a cool thing, right? I think it's a cool sounding phrase. I think enunciation wise or alliteration or assonance, echo chamber. I think while we don't consider the structure of words and how they can take off, that definitely plays a big role. And within that, the meaning of the word, it's prudent because we all live in a similar world where we're shown ricocheting ideas, formulated things that are reflected back at us. And to term them as echo chambers is, on the surface, it's an apt terming. It makes sense to combine the two or link. But what I'm going to point out over the course of this episode is that while echo chambers are prevalent in social media and our online lives, as well as in real life, that what we think and term as echo chambers within that context actually varies slightly. And those slight differences over time become greater and greater differences. So echo chambers, I don't necessarily have to kind of define this. I think most people in today's culture kind of understand what the concept of an echo chamber is, and that is the ideas reflected back at us unchanged. So if we have an idea and we put it out to the world, we basically have it reflected back at us, and it's the exact same thing coming back. And it's not necessarily confined to just our algorithms on Instagram and TikTok and other things. It's also in real life. Like, I'm sure we've all had moments in our lives where we're talking to a friend about something that's happened in our lives, whether it's a relationship or friendship, something at work, and the friend validates us and basically just reflects what we've said back at us, and that makes us feel good. And I think in that context, that's not necessarily a negative thing. It's a positive thing to support our friends and also validate someone. And I think it's it's very difficult to validate someone and not necessarily, put them in an echo chamber. I think that takes great skill to do that. And I think those kinds of echo chambers have a place in our lives. Like, we don't always need to be challenged. We don't always need to have our ideas, challenged or changed by the person we're speaking to them about. But it grows far beyond that, and obviously it's a completely different context when we look at that, and I think even before social media and internet, there's a phrase yes men, right, and the whole context of a yes men is of being surrounded by yes people, are people that again put us in echo chambers, don't challenge our ideas, and leave us thinking that what we believe is correct, and we should reinforce that and continue along that road. But in the modern kind of day sphere of an echo chamber, it's definitely closely linked to algorithms, right? So I'm going to be referring a lot to Instagram because I think that is a lot of the time it's the hub. Obviously, there's TikTok, which is also massive, but Instagram, I think, is a phenomenon that really began as somewhere to share pictures, and I think when Snapchat kind of influenced where it went, as Snapchat introduced more kind of pop culture content, and I think Instagram kind of saw that and using tried and true methods of hooking people in, and now it's a behemoth of which is central to most people. I think when people don't have an Instagram, it's very uncommon. Percentage wise, the vast majority of young people in Western society and other societies do have Instagram. Now, when we talk about algorithms, that's also an oversaturated kind of word, and it's one of these things that probably have been spoken about a bit too much. When someone, say in my position, comes in and wants to talk about algorithms, I think a knee-jerk reaction is to come back and say, here we go. Like, I've heard this before. I'm very familiar with this content. This person isn't going to say anything new, and I think that's kind of the intrigue and why I want to speak about things like this, because I think what's interesting is the algorithm and the echo chamber, as we know it, is still very much prevalent in our day-to-day lives. And just because it's been spoken about and maybe oversaturated, it doesn't necessarily mean that its impact has lessened at all. In fact, it's probably grown. And I think that there is something in that where we are shown the problematic aspects of our lives, and we're exposed to it constantly to the point where we kind of numb to those things, and we overlook that it's still important. It's still very much something that we should concern ourselves with. And in regards to the algorithm, people would often term that as an echo chamber, and in the sense that when you watch something, you're often shown more things like that. So if you watch a video that's propagating a certain idea, it's probably going to show you more videos like that. The issue with kind of calling it an echo chamber and stopping it at that is because an echo chamber is circular, and it's also kind of a closed loop. So if we imagine we're trapped in a drum and there's an echo, what is an echo? If we call down a tunnel and we go hello, and it echoes down, it's our voice still. It's still coming from the source, and it is still the exact same. In reality, it's you cannot edit it, right? But in the concept of algorithms and social media, that's not quite what's happening. What's happening is, yes, we will get more information of things that we've clicked on and are interested in, but we can't necessarily control the nuances of change within that. And anyone who's looked at self-improvement or whatever it is, this is an analogy I guess I'll use, is they say get better 1% every day. And if you do that, you're 1% better every day, then by the end of the year, it's going to compound and you're going to be a totally different person. That's a very popular analogy. So if we look at it in the concept of ideas and videos that we watch, again, whether it's on TikTok, whether it's a Kick streamer or a Twitch streamer or on YouTube, if we think we're being shown an echo chamber, when in reality things are being molded 1% at a time, by the end of the year, that echo chamber is going to look very different. And therefore, by definition, it isn't an echo chamber because it's showing us something more and new and adding on things that weren't initially there. And I think that's why there is, I believe, an issue with I guess, minimizing our algorithms to say, oh, they're just echo chambers, and saying, oh, this is my echo chamber. And I think we all have our little worlds, and we all kind of secretly live in them. We're not constantly showing people what pops up in our explore feed and the things that we're interested in. I would wager a lot of people probably have some guilty pleasures or embarrassing things that pop up on their feed that they wouldn't necessarily show their friends or their family. Maybe things they don't want others knowing that they're interested in. And that's why you see a lot of the time with some public figures, things they like potentially or have reshared, and all of a sudden it becomes a bit controversial because like, well, if this person is seeing and liking these things, the implication is that there's a lot more under that iceberg, under that surface that we aren't seeing. So with that, I think it's really important to kind of highlight this before moving on to other ideas and also the specific ideas that are within those spaces. And we will be going into a myriad of topics, and I think we'll be having a lot of fun with it, but also be discussing some serious things. And the intention behind this is serious because I think if we don't address the fact that we're heavily influenced by what we consume day in, day out, and that these things can slowly mold and become something a lot more sinister than what it begins as, then really that's the definition of indoctrination. And I think indoctrination is a very strong word. It has heavy implications, and it can be quite daunting, but that's exactly what's happening in a very minor day-to-day level. And I could use an example, like let's say, for example, if someone has an interest in socio-political issues, and immigration is something that's really, really on the frontier at the moment in multiple countries. And you see people who have certain viewpoints about immigration, whether it's we need to stop it entirely or stop a certain demographic or certain people from countries coming into other countries. And people obviously support these views, right? And in Australia, there was recently some demonstrations against a certain amount of visas coming in, and in other countries, it's also happening. And looking at how who are these people who support these notions? These people aren't plucked out of thin air. These people believe what they're expressing. I think to go to a demonstration about something, you obviously believe in it. So where does that journey begin? And I think that's what's fascinating to me is the journey does begin somewhere, and 100% in my opinion, it definitely resides on social media. So if we look at something that is concerning, let's say we see a news story about an attack that happened or a crime that occurred, and the person happened to be an immigrant, right? And we watch this, and we engage, we read comments, and we see certain levels of outrage. The algorithm takes that story that we've watched intently and thinks, okay, well, what is this person interested in? Now you could say this person's interested in news, but in reality, the algorithm's going to take multiple topics of that and say, well, this is about immigration. And that 1% might turn into another news story of a similar issue. But a year from now, that 1% has turned into that we have a mass immigration problem or an immigration problem of a certain demographic. And this person will be fully convinced. And they'll be convinced because of what they're watching without necessarily fully verifying what they're seeing. And again, like while this may seem really, really obvious to a lot of people, because immigration is an easy thing, it also comes down to fitness beliefs and diet beliefs and how we should live our lives day to day and how we should treat people and what is the correct ideology to have. Are we becoming too progressive? Are we becoming too conservative? Are we too moderate? Do we sit on the fence too often? What is actually happening? And it can become a bit chaotic trying to figure out what's going on in life and what should we care about and what should we be wary of and who has our best interests. And in the world of attention grabbing things, like when you're trying to build a profile, it's well documented that the more extreme you are, the more likely you are to garner a following. So if I come out and say something that maybe I don't even believe, but other people might find it interesting, then I've succeeded, right? If I'm succeeding in getting eyeballs, and at the end of the day, That's my goal. It doesn't really matter what I say, and it doesn't matter if it's factual or not. And there's examples of multitudes of examples of influencers and public figures that have subscribed to this kind of thing, and it's nothing new. It's just as the way we consume information progresses, it develops with that. And you look at certain major influences, such as one person that I'll bring up is Andrew Tate. And the reason I'll bring up Andrew Tate is because he in a lot of ways is a pioneer of outrageous statements and monetizing them. And I think he is a phenomenon because he came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden everyone knew who he was. But in reality, he isn't necessarily known for one particular thing or the other. He just saturated the market with himself. He knew that there was a lane that he could, I guess, go in, recognizing that there were people that would align with these extreme statements, and the rest is history, right? And he is a publicly known figure. Everyone knows who he is. And he is definitely featured in people's so-called echo chambers or algorithms at first. And over time, these algorithms would have developed into ideas that reach far beyond anything that I think Andrew Tate probably would have ever imagined when he began with his, I guess, social media campaigns. And I think a lot of the traps that we can fall into is thinking that what we look at day to day doesn't matter, and it doesn't necessarily have this big, great effect on us. And I think, again, when I refer to a very, very kind of low-hanging fruit figure in Andrew Tate, I think that's a primary example of that the things we consume day to day 100% matter. And the dangers of perceiving something as harmless when it's not is, I think, exemplified in the case of Andrew Tate. Now, if I think a lot of people, when they first started watching Andrew Tate, they probably started watching it out of a form of incredulousness or, again, like as a spectacle. And they probably didn't realize that just their view and just their few watching of the videos that he put out was actually building him up. And he went from being a really fringe character to the man, to the guy that is at the top of the pyramid. And again, like, this happened covertly. It didn't happen overtly. It wasn't like, hey guys, this guy's trying to become the next big thing. It was just like all of a sudden you're seeing all of this stuff, and then now he's established, and now he's made multitudes of money based on the profile that he built. And I will admit, I am someone that watched what he was originally putting out. I didn't agree with it. I didn't subscribe to the belief. I watched it as a spectacle. I watched it as someone being like, whoa, like, is this really happening, or is this something that is actually going to take off? And to give everyone a bit of credit, I don't think anyone would have realized where it was going or what was actually happening, but it was orchestrated. And that's why anybody that kind of calls Andrew Tate an idiot in that sense, he's clearly not an idiot. He clearly knows exactly what he's doing. I think he started with a vision and understood that the potential was beyond anything that anyone could really imagine. And I think, like I mentioned previously, it exceeded his expectations. There's no doubt it would. And so when we watch things from day to day and we think it's harmless watching it, I think that's a massive case of, well, it's not necessarily harmless, because in this economy of social media, it's views, it's engagement. That is the currency. When people are trying to make something, it is your attention that they want. So, day to day, even though it might seem like it doesn't really matter, when you combine all of those people in those same positions, it actually does. And the things that we watch regardless of whether we agree with what we're watching, and if we're watching it purely based on spectacle, the things that we watch, they matter. And over time, they will grow into something that is there's greater than just one minute or 30-second video. So I think that's definitely relevant when we think about day to day what we're consuming. Whether we think we're watching what we're watching just for entertainment, for morbid curiosity. I don't know about you, but when I see something that frightens me, I often will click on it, and all of a sudden I'm being shown a lot of things that frighten me. Now, do I agree with the implications of what this frightening thing might mean? Like, let's say if I see an attack on the street and it's quite confronting, and at the same time, like I said, the morbid curiosity in me watches these things. If I'm constantly showing these videos, which started as, I guess, a morbid curiosity, then what happens to my frame of mind when I go out on the street? If this is what's imprinting, and it's not necessarily just attacks on the street. It's also just like going to the gym, or how we treat our bodies, or the perceptions of our bodies. Like, if all we consume is something that is about aesthetics, then it's a given that if we consume that every day, 365 days a year, and that is what we see, that we're going to care more and more about what was once a bit of like a gossip magazine style content for us. And I think magazines have well and truly declined, but in their place, we have a million infinite different magazines that are personalized to us and presented as harmless and presented as just reflections of what we already like. But in reality, it's not just that. And over time, I will be coming back to these concepts, talking about echo chambers, and the reality is that what I will term it as is a bit of a rolling snowball down a hill. So when we think an echo chamber, in reality, it should be a closed loop, a ricocheting of ideas. But online, it's rolling down a hill, and as it rolls down, it collects more ideas, and they could be little, and it's, as I said, it's only gradual. It's collecting a bit more mass, every rotation. And as it collects more mass and more ideas, it puts those ideas into that ricochet. So over time, more and more ideas are getting into the sphere, and more ideas are ricocheting, but we're perceiving it as part of the same original idea. And that might not seem like a big thing, but 100% it's a big thing, because if we think that we haven't actually changed our perspectives, when in reality we have changed our perspectives, or our perspectives have been molded by the minuscule amounts of additional things that change in the way we consume, then we're unaware of the fact that someone is influencing us, or being influenced by the things that we watch. So the reason I've opened with this as the opening episode, while kind of not really getting into examples, is because it's really important to highlight the concept of what can happen when we look at something that isn't serving us well. We look at it as harmless, and like a Trojan horse, it kind of comes into our world, and in a way, it's a bit like Inception, right? Planting an idea in our minds that we believe is our own, but actually comes from an external source. So what I'd encourage the listeners of this episode is to kind of, when you're scrolling through, I don't want to make some kind of massive change or encourage you to make a massive change. It's more about observing and seeing what's popping up. Why do you think it's popping up? What purpose does it serve for you to watch these things? Is it a morbid curiosity? Are you frightened by it? Is it aligning of your interests? Like, if it's fitness content, what about that fitness content? Is it that it appeals to you for you to continue to consume? Now, a lot of the time it's subconscious, and we don't really know why we're looking at things, but there is definitely a reason. There is definitely some kind of feedback that's happening that encourages us to continue to watch those kinds of things. And a lot of the time it's either playing into paranoia or insecurity. It's playing into things that concern us, more so, I think, that things that actually help us. And while people may not agree with that statement, if you look at what you're watching, you'll be able to tell me whether it's true or not. So I think I would encourage over the next week to kind of just be aware of what's out there, what you're consuming, whatever medium it is on, and asking yourself, what purpose is this serving in my life? Is it a neutral, net zero gain or detriment? Is it of benefit, or is it of detriment? Is it just me wasting time, or is it something greater? And is it leading me to changing without actually realizing I am changing? Is it something more than just something to do while I am idle, before bed, when I'm getting out of bed, on my lunch break? How is it affecting me day to day? And from there, we'll expand. And I'm really excited to talk to you. I've definitely got some great ideas and great topics to go through. So thanks for listening for this first episode of many. We're going to be doing it weekly, and very excited to go through. You've been listening to the very first episode of Oversaturated, entitled Garbage. I look forward to chatting with you guys next week. Have a great one, and I'll see you then.